Welcome back to Boxing During Dinner, the second installment of the new Boxing During Dinner with the familiar faces Armando Alvarez, David Berry, of course. I'm the new addition, and when I was brought in, I'm a huge fan, and you may be able to tell by seeing what we've done on the new Boxeo Telemundo. Given the opportunity to change that, the first suggestion I made was we need to bring in Claudia Trejos. I don't think there's any woman in this sport, and I will put her up against any man in this sport that we love to cover, boxing, that is as connected, as informative as Claudia Trejos. So when I was given the opportunity by Armando and David, and thank you so much, guys, to sort of put out a guest list of who I would love to have, she was at the top of the list. So Claudia, thank you so much for joining us. It's truly a pleasure to have you join us here at Boxing During Dinner, and welcome.
It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite, and thank you for your faith in me. I think you have more faith in me than I have in myself. So thank you. You know what? I'm humbled because we do what we love, and we get to play every day. So thank you for letting me join into the sandbox.
No,
Absolutely.
and I agree, Victor. I mean, Claudia's one of the very best. I mean, we go back, and a really quick story with Claudia. That's like it's like a like, you know, to show like our love for things that we both love, right? Stuff for that we get along in. And after Pacquiao Mayweather, I remember being with Claudia at the airport in Las Vegas, and we started talking about our dads, both of who are no longer with us, but we were like in tears, we're hugging, we're talking, having like this deep conversation, and in comes like Desmond Howard, and Desmond Howard like Claudia, Armando, did I walk in at the wrong moment? Like, you know, we're like in tears, like, no, it's fine. But but Claudia, aside from being one of the very best in boxing, she's just a very good person too, and
Absolutely.
and we absolutely love her. But yeah, let's get into the thick of things. We have a lot to talk about. Heavyweight division. Last week, Victor, David, we had Mike Coppinger on, and he was breaking the news on this whole Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder situation. Fast forward a week, and so much has happened. I mean, it from when we spoke last, right, to where we at now. We were talking about Deontay Wilder taking some step away money, some step aside money.
What did I say last week? What did I tell Mike last week?
You called it. You called it.
The ego, it was more than just physically being beaten up. That ego took a hit, and he's not willing to step aside. There's no money in the world that you could offer Deontay Wilder to step aside at this point. It's his ego, man. He needs to get back in the ring. He needs to show Tyson Fury or anyone, hey, you know, that's not me. Blame anyone but himself. And I didn't see him willing to take that step aside. I wish he would have, because we all want to see, I think we all wish he would have taken that step aside money, but it's beyond just physically being hurt with Wilder, man.
Yeah, so Claudia, what do you think of this whole situation? Because we're here thinking we're gonna get this, you know, the mega fight, the two biggest Brits right now in boxing, and all of a sudden Deontay Wilder's like, yo, I still have a contract. The arbitrator judges in my favor, and I want the fight. I don't want step away money. I want the fight.
You know, I'm gonna add to what Vic just said, and it's all about the money. And for all those that once said that boxing was dead, the pandemic was just gonna throw boxing over the edge, I got news for you, because there's enough money for that fight, then a mega fight, and why not? Let's close the year with a bang. And
there's enough money for step aside money. That's crazy.
Right.
There's money for everything and everybody. And I gotta tell you, I agree. This is a bad call for Deontay. All this time he's been inactive, and he's gonna face a killer, hands down, perhaps the most dangerous fighter we have today. His size, just on sheer size, and then he's so nimble and he's so fast despite his size. This is the real boogeyman. I'm telling y'all, this is the real boogeyman, and I don't think Deontay can actually live the fact that he went down so bad. And like Vic just said, and we were making fun of it during our show on Friday. So we're blaming the water, the costume, his leg. I don't know who else we're going to blame. La prima hermana. I don't care. But none of those are going to show up for this fight to, take care of Deontay. I hurt for the man, but if this is what it takes for you to be humbled and at any given time just say, you know what, there was a better man in the ring, so be it. Sometimes that's all it takes. But I got to tell you, it's all about the money. At the end, we will have that big fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, and everybody's going to be watching. And I'm just going to say this just for shits and giggles. Even if they lose their fights, their respective fights, we're still going to see these two meeting at the end of the year.
They have to.
Mark my
They have to
words.
fight. It's the biggest
That's
fight.
a really good possibility, though. You have what you have going up against Wilder. I mean, what you have going up against Fury and Wilder, and then Usyk and Joshua. It's what we've loved about boxing, right? Back in the 70s and 80s, that anyone could step in and beat each other up. I think we have that in the heavyweight division. I don't think there's any other division in boxing right now, David, that can claim the same, that anyone can beat anyone at any given moment. Because we thought we had that in the welterweight division, and maybe so with how Pacquiao just came in and destroyed Keith Thurman. But I don't know if there's any other division in boxing, like in the heavyweight division, that if Fury can beat a Wilder, Wilder can beat anyone because of his punching power. Anthony Joshua was supposed to be the elite one, but he gets knocked out by Andy Ruiz, and he comes back and beats Andy Ruiz. It's just a mess in that heavyweight division, but it's a good mess.
Yeah, and I think by the time these guys are done cleaning themselves out, there's not going to be like an end, right? Like let's say hypothetically that Fury and Joshua both win their next fights. There's a lot that could happen in those fights that still make this continuing round robin very viable. And as long, to Claudia's point, right, follow the money. As long as there's money on the table, these fights are going to get made. I don't see a scenario where Usyk beats Joshua, but you can argue he is the fourth best heavyweight outside of them, and he hasn't had a shot like this yet. And he hasn't looked like cruiserweight Usyk, but he's still Usyk. He's never lost as a professional. And then and you could say, okay, well, maybe he doesn't have a great shot. Well, neither did Andy Ruiz. Anthony Joshua is a flawed but gifted fighter, but key operative there is flawed. So on any given night, Usyk could topple him, and
Usyk could dance. He's a good dancer.
Usyk can dance.
You guys,
are we talking about that Ukrainian dance?
Okay.
Yeah.
Stop. En serio.
Please.
No. But wait.
These guys love Chris. And I'm just not there yet. I may be late to the party, but I'm just not there yet.
Why?
I don't know if he's ready to take on, like you say, maybe the fourth best heavyweight. So we just forget about Luis Ortiz. I know I'm a Cuban bias, but
I agree. This is what I was gonna say. I loved Usyk, and I think he's a great. Talking about this new division, the bridge weight, and then cruiserweight, and then I think he's tall. I think he's good. I think he's got great fundamentals. But let's be honest, he has not been tested with a real heavyweight.
He has not.
And Anthony
He went through hell with Derek Chisora.
En serio?
Yeah, no, but he did go through hell with Derek Chisora. We're talking about Usyk, right?
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. Even that, it's like, how do we put Chisora in the top 5 of the?
He's not. No, I'm supporting your argument. Yeah, he's outside of that class.
Completely outside. So the possibilities. Anybody can be a Brady's Prescott against Amir Khan at any given day.
Oof.
No, I'm just throwing it out there.
There's no Amir Khans in the heavyweight division.
Ask Andy Ruiz and see what he says about that.
Yeah, fair point.
I know Claudia Claudia and I have had this conversation. She considers Frank Sanchez, who, by the way, I was on the phone with earlier today, and says that he's on the undercard of Mayweather, Logan Paul. I had no idea. I don't know. I'm not into the breaking news thing. I'm not Mike. I leave that to the experts. But supposedly he's on the undercard. He'll be here in 2 weeks. Here in Miami, so that's good news for us Hispanics who love to watch Frank. But Claudia says Frank's a small heavyweight. So what is Chris? Because I've been next to Frank, and Frank towers over me. I'm 6'1", 214, and Frank is just a monster standing next to. So it's like if he's a small heavyweight, and a lot of folks, I'm not just calling out David or Armando. I know a lot of folks who have Chris at the top pound for pound list. I just don't know if he's ready for these heavyweights, the Joshua Fury. Hell, put him in there with Andy Ruiz. Look, Andy looked bad in his last outing. He could possibly beat Andy Ruiz, but I don't know. I think we've accelerated Chris to a position where I'm just not buying just yet. I'm not saying you guys are wrong, but I'm just not willing to go all in with Chris just yet.
Are we talking about Usyk?
Yes.
I didn't know he went by Chris.
Oh, my fault. My fault. That's
perfect. I was like, oh shit, am I really that bad of a boxing fan?
No, that's me, dude. I get all their names all mixed up.
Yeah. Well, let me zoom back to the original point, because I agree. Out of that bunch, I do think he's the fourth, and the only reason I'm not putting Luis Ortiz ahead of him is because we've seen him lose convincingly twice to Wilder. But I still think that Luis Ortiz could theoretically beat Usyk, and it's a fight I would love to see too. But the point being, by the time this is all settled, Deontay Wilder, I think is always viable because of his right hand, no matter how much I think Fury is just going to paste him this time around, just the way that he did in the second, maybe easier. But people are still going to want to pay to see him. He's got the loud mouth. He's got the one punch power. And even if he does lose convincingly to Tyson Fury, he still becomes a very viable opponent with a lot of money in it for a lot of guys in the, we'll call, 4 through 10 range of the heavyweight division. And the Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight is can't miss regardless of what happens here. We've seen Joshua already come back from defeat. We've seen Tyson Fury come back from hell at the end of the first fight and right that wrong in the second. So none of those guys are ever out of a fight. And for the UK fans, just in general, that's a monstrous fight. I mean, you could fill 2 Wembley stadiums and probably still have people standing outside. So I don't care what happens in this next fight. I think that's a can't miss. And boxing needs to focus on that. They need to make and this is such a tired thing to say at this point in the game, but we've seen what happens when you put the best against the best. Even if they're not winning every time out, so what? People will want to pay to see the top guys in the division. And when there's competitive fights, you're going to put asses in seats.
And Claudio, to a point that David made, he said that he thinks Fury's going to win the fight even easier this time around.
I agree.
I was having an argument with someone the other day. Because they were saying, it's a 50-50 fight. I don't recall in a rematch such a one-sided beating as the last Wilder Fury fight. And look,
Antonio Tarver, Roy Jones.
Well, I mean, but that
any excuses tonight, Roy?
But that was a one-punch second-round knockout. Like, this was just like a savage beating for many rounds.
Yeah.
So much so, somebody could get caught with a punch had they fought a third time at the time, right? Let's just say, I mean, maybe
Roy
not.
Jones, Montel Griffin.
No, and if we're gonna go fight by fight, not everybody's gonna be a Marco Antonio Barrera and an Eric Terrible Morales. And now we're gonna go into toolbox. When we look at Deontay Wilder's toolbox, it's so limited. Like you just said, Dave, it's only that overhand right. That's it. It comes down like a sledgehammer. But when you're dealing with a guy that's that much taller, guess what? Your weapon has been minimized to non-existent. And the reason why I do like Chris and Usyk, and I love Frank Sanchez, and I'm going to get into why I think he's small, is because they are very sound fighters. Their fundamentals are solid. They have an extensive amateur schooling, and international experience. What does that bring? Hours, flying hours, just a lot of flying hours. You know what that brings to? The fact that you gotta make the adjustments on the fly. Deontay has shown not once, many times. Let's go back to the Luis Ortiz fight. Zero ability to adjust. Once he faces a nimble guy that can actually walk him down, he's done. He can't do anything on his heels. Zero. So let's backtrack. Somebody like Tyson Fury, even though he's 20 feet tall, he can go forwards, he can go sideways. His circular motion is amazing. He's nimble and he's fast. How in the hell did we get that? Now, Frank Sanchez, even though he's 6'4", let's go back to who's the dominant force right now at the heavyweights. Tyson Fury. Let's go back to the Klitschko eras. What made them so good? The fact that they had that stiff stick right in front, very Ukrainian school, but they could walk the ring like nobody. So that's why I say either Frank packs on some muscle or he's going to be as good as yesterday's news. As sound as he is, there's no way he's going to get underneath that jab to do any type of damage against somebody like Tyson Fury.
Yeah, and Tyson Fury, I mean, he's such a unicorn in the heavyweight division because when we used to see the big heavyweights in the past, I mean, Riddick Bowe at the time was a pretty big heavyweight, and Riddick Bowe was a great boxer. But aside from that, you saw Lennox Lewis was a great boxer, but he wasn't as nimble. With Tyson Fury, you see the muffin top, you see just the way he looks, and you're like, there's no way this guy could box like that. And it's incredible. It's incredible. Man. So to me, it's just like Wilder either lands a shot and knocks him out, as he can with anybody,
And he can.
or he just gets beat up again. And those are the two things. And with Joshua and Usyk, I mean, logic would tell me the bigger guy should win. And Joshua, I think, learned a valuable lesson against Andy Ruiz. We saw it in the rematch, even though Andy Ruiz came in, even bigger than what he was, right? But Usyk could make things interesting because he has that pedigree. He has that experience. He knows how to beat you. He's a southpaw. How's he gonna do against a southpaw? I mean, I'm totally discounting Charles Martin, as David will probably as well. But Usyk can make things interesting, and I think he has the better shot of playing spoiler than Deontay Wilder.
I do actually agree in that specific scenario. And, one of the things about Wilder, not to keep talking about him and Fury until we're blue in the face, but he is not a set fighter who throws a right-hand punch by generating torque. He has to launch himself into that punch to land it. For as long as Fury's pushing into him, it's not happening. So we'll put that aside. I do think that fight is going to be really one-sided, and we've sort of made our point on that. I do think that the Usyk argument is a better one. Again, I don't think Usyk wins that fight, but I think he makes that fight challenging for Joshua and makes him look ordinary and maybe uncomfortable, quite often. You saw that really since the Andy Ruiz rematch. He's trying to turn himself into a boxer puncher when the reality is his better, disciplines, really, in my experience, are when he is shooting out a little bit more offense. I think if he tightened up his vulnerabilities in that regard, you would have seen perhaps the best of Anthony Joshua, who I think is still a fighter who's not entirely sure which version of himself he wants to be. So I do think Usyk's speed and angles and specifically his lateral motion will cause him trouble. But Joshua's a skilled fighter. He's a schooled fighter. He has more tools in his belt than he did prior to the Andy Ruiz fight. I think he's polishing them, but I think he will figure out Usyk, maybe even just by sheer volume and jab at some point. But I think it's an interesting fight, certainly more interesting than Fury versus Wilder.
Another interesting fight was this past weekend. An apology and I guess dinner to David and Mike as well, because they were right
and some
on the
tiramisu
on Josh Taylor and Jose Ramirez. Josh did what Mike and David said. Obviously, Armando and I, who thought Ramirez would find a way. Claudia, I was on the record going with Jose Ramirez as well. But Josh Taylor, only the second undisputed champion at the 140-pound division, and pretty much making a statement on Saturday night. Look, I thought we were on route to see what we were expecting, Armando, because Jose Ramirez was finding a way to win that fight until those two knockdowns occurred, and then it was just a totally different fight after that.
Yeah, and it was the infighting, right? Both knockdowns were at close range. The first one, I think, totally caught Ramirez off guard. The little short.
Walked into it.
He just walked into it. The second, you want to blame Kenny Bayless. You want to, but that uppercut. I mean, it was like an uppercut from hell. And it's as good as uppercut as you could see in boxing. That Ramirez survived that.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about some reasons on why he survived that as well. He got a little bit of help from his friends, but the fact
survived it. He still
did. The fact that he survived it and made it an interesting fight and won, to me, the last few rounds, Ramirez he's awesome. I love him as a person. I love him as a fighter. He'll be back. Like, no shame in losing to Josh Taylor. I mean, he needs to hang his head way up high. But Claudia, this fight, aside from the fact that Josh Taylor proved to be one of the he proved that he's one of the best fighters in boxing today. Had a few miscues from Kenny Bayless. It had a little bit of drama around the fight. So, it's a rare occurrence to be quite honest.
With his experience, I mean, Bayless, I'm not even going to try to say how many championship fights he's ever reffed, but we all know he's been around forever. I was little and he was there. I'm already 50 something and he's still there. That gives you a very good idea of how long he's been around. So I just think it was not the best day at the office for Kenny. I think there was a sense of urgency, I think, and there was a lot of punishment going back and forth, because even though Jose Carlos took the worst part of this fight, I mean, he dished out some very good blows. I mean, he was always looking for that uppercut, and he was going with that short left hand that was looking for, you know, the liver. It was a very well danced fight. Now, the effectiveness was 100% Josh Taylor. And Taylor did the best version of Taylor, because God knows even his defense was like on point. So can we say, and let's backtrack. Kenny has seen many things happen in the ring. And Kenny was there for the Cepeda fight. And Kenny has seen what somebody like Jose Carlos can endure. Today, we live a completely different environment. Do we really need our fighters to endure that kind of punishment, especially when we're going into the latter rounds? And let's add to the fact that he was really taking a whole lot of punishment, and it was brutal, and he kept going at it, went down twice. And he would, I don't know if you guys realize, but he was like, his eyes were wide open. There was no sense of I'm lost. I mean, he was on point with Robert. And I even spoke with Robert right after the fight. He says, we were not hurt. We were just stunned, because it's the first time that Jose Carlos goes down. So I think Kenny had that in the back of his mind. It's like, these guys are willing to just leave it all in the ring. Is it worth it? You know, we're living a completely different environment. So I'm not going to like go down on Kenny. I am going to give all the accolades and all the credit to Josh Taylor. He fought a perfect fight. And if this is wins to come, I don't see anybody at this point in time at 140 taking over, because he was just that solid. And I don't know if we have a word like maña, but God knows he was mañoso, man. You know, with the holding and the hitting in the back,
very mañoso.
Holding, you know, that tires anybody. And
that's what makes some fighters great, like Bernard Hopkins, right? He was very mañoso.
Yes.
And that's just experience. But like to Claudia's point, right? At 140, who could beat Josh Taylor? Because now there's talk about him, you know, he talked about Terrence Crawford after. Will that happen? Probably not, because it looks like no fighter versus Terrence Crawford is looks to be happening anytime soon. But who do we like, Victor? Who do we like at 140 to take on Josh Taylor? Because I guess like the common sense one would be a rematch with Regis Prograis. It was a very good first fight. Regis is a very good fighter. Or Teofimo Lopez beats Cambosos, moves up to 140, and we could see that fight.
I'm willing to take that rematch, or even a rematch with Ramirez. I'm signing me up for one of those. But I don't know how David feels. I don't think he stays at 140. I think 140 is the afterthought. I think he'll do exactly what Terrence Crawford did. He'll move up to 147, chase Terrence Crawford. That's a bigger money fight. Bob Arum said it could possibly happen in October, November. I don't see 140 being the division where many are looking to stay at. If you're at 135, there's a lot of promise for you there because of how loaded that division is. But the real money to be made is at 147. It's why Terrence Crawford became the first undisputed champion, and let all those titles go just to move up and chase those guys at 147. I don't think he stays there. I don't know how you feel, David.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think there's probably 3 fights that would keep him there. I think, and Armando's mentioned all of them. I think a Prograis rematch looks better. If anybody's stock went up on, other than Josh Taylor's on Saturday, it was his, because there's a lot of, argument justifiably that Prograis fought, a better fight against him than Ramirez did. So I think that's a fight people might want to see. Jose Ramirez, according to the judges, won just as many rounds as Josh Taylor. And if you exclude the knockdowns, you're looking at a draw. So I think, in a couple scenarios, that's very viable. Jose Ramirez absolutely earned the right to a rematch should he choose it. And then I think the other one you mentioned is Teofimo Lopez. Among those 3 fights, I think there's good money in them. They're competitive fights. Josh Taylor, by all accounts, has no issues making the weight. But if those, and he has the mandatory against Jack Catterall, which he seems inclined to take. So my suspicion is he wants to stick at 140 for at least 1, maybe 2 more fights, taking the Catterall as a stay busy fight to see what unfolds in the meantime. But I agree. Your unification at 140 is really your key to being credible at 47. Terrence Crawford proved that to the end, that once he got to 47, I think he shit his pants. But in terms of how to manage your career, that's a conversation for another day. But I think that Josh Taylor has a bullseye focus on achievement, and I think 47 is a great division for him. He's got the frame for it, but I don't think it's going to be against Crawford at 47. I think Terrence Crawford is as good as gone from Top Rank by the time that his contract is up in October. I think he's jumping to PBC or trying to take free agency in any way that he can, and I think that Josh Taylor is going to kind of carve his own path and wait for some of those chips to fall.
I have one more thing to add.
Before you jump in, Claudia, because David brought up a really good point about Teofimo Lopez, and you spoke to Teofimo Lopez on Boxeo Telemundo just a few months back. Teofimo Lopez told Claudia that he's willing to go up to 154. Mm-hmm. He's not done just going up 140. He's willing, and he can put on all the way up to 154 if need be. So if he gets past George June 19th, and both guys are obviously Top Rank, and they can make that fight happen, Teofimo was interested in unifying all belts in all divisions. So I could easily, what you mentioned, and then piggybacking on what he told Claudia just a few months ago about moving all the way up to 154, that could definitely be a scenario. Beat George Kambosos, okay, I solidified 135. Now let me go up and take all those 4 belts from Josh Taylor, because he feels he can go all the way up to 154.
Wow.
Well, he did take the boogeyman at 135, which is Lomachenko. But I got another name that we're not considering that could fluctuate from 135 to 147.
Mikey Garcia?
Mikey?
Absolutely. And guess who Mr. Josh Taylor was talking right after the fight?
Mikey Garcia.
I'm just going to let that ball roll right there. Y'all do whatever you want with that. I'm just saying. I just get paid to look cute.
Well, why do you think you're here?
I would love to see Mikey go back down in weight. I would love to see Mikey go back down. I don't think welterweight's a division for him.
No, I totally agree. But let's go back to my initial statement. It's all about the money. I mean, there's only so much money that you're going to make at 140, especially when you have nobody else to play with. At 147 is such a stacked division that you have extraordinary B fighters, C fighters, D fighters, and you don't have to expose yourself to being beaten up. So there's money to be made, in a very long list. Whereas at 140, who really is calling and bringing those pay-per-views and those eyeballs? Not that many.
I think it's a stepping stone division at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
And in the history of boxing, I think 140 has always been, the division that you kind of pass through before you get to 147. But before we go, Claudia, you mentioned Mikey Garcia. And to me, I'm a Mikey Garcia fan. I think he's an outstanding fighter. He's one of the very best in the last, 15, 20 years, right? But Mikey Garcia, for whatever reason, after he went up to Errol Spence, has become almost an afterthought. Because Claudia is absolutely right. Mikey Garcia should be a big fight that you talk about, especially at 140 for Josh Taylor or Jose Ramirez or Regis Prograis. And right now, all I could think of, and this is boxing during dinner. I am eating spaghetti and meatballs.
Nice.
You didn't invite us. You're not sharing.
What the hell, right?
Once we're in person, we all need to eat together. But everybody thinks of the Mikey Garcia that eats the spaghetti and meatballs, the pudgy Mikey Garcia that we've been seeing at fights lately.
No, wait, he's not pudgy. He's just husky.
He's fleshy.
Husky.
Yeah.
But Claudia, you're absolutely right. Why has Mikey Garcia? Maybe it's the reasons I just mentioned, but why has all of a sudden he become an afterthought?
Gary Russell Garcia.
He was chasing the Pacquiao lottery, and that's just not going to happen.
Well, exactly. He was in line, and that was an ongoing negotiation with Eddie Hearn, and that was one of their bets with Mikey Garcia to bring Manny Pacquiao to fight Mikey Garcia. And that's the reason why he fought Jesse Vargas on the zone. Now, I'm going to say this, and it's not even fair that I say this because I've known him since he was like that high yesterday. Mikey is not a boxer. Mikey likes boxing, and he happens to be good at it. He's not a boxer. He is his head businessman. So many other things, and he has so many different opportunities that, and even with his brother, he's very intelligent. His boxing IQ is up there. And he's the type of guy that's always with his dad, Don Eduardo Garcia, who's like a master in fight plans, and with Pita and Robert and the whole Garcia family, Danny. So he was born into this. So he happens to be, remember that one kid that was good in music, but really never put much into it, but he just happened to be great? That's Mikey.
That's Mikey.
Boxing. So he goes in, he makes a little bit of money, he gets out, then he gets another opportunity, gets in, takes a win, you know?
Yeah, and that's the same read I have on him. I think I made the joke a second ago, Gary Russell Garcia, because I do get the sense that, you know, that Mikey's a part-time fighter and doesn't have aspirations to be more. I get it. At a certain level in a lot of fighters' careers, they can only get up for a certain level of challenge. Mikey Garcia was the peak of 135 for a while, cleared out some great fighters in divisions below that, went up and fought a big money fight against Earl Spence. So he's made his money. It's going to be hard for him to get up for another challenge. And for better or worse, Mikey's become the mistress and nobody wants to marry him. You know, he was sort of like an on accident opponent for Earl Spence. And I can't imagine that was a fight Earl Spence really wanted, but it was a name and he was trying to get some credibility. They needed each other in that regard, but that was the appetizer. That was never the entree. And for better or worse, I think that's what Mikey Garcia's career is at this point. All of that goes back to say, I think he's a great opponent for Josh Taylor. It makes a lot of sense. It's a chance for him to really inject himself in a meaning way back in. And it's a good money fight for both of those guys as well. An opportunity that Mikey's never unified. And so this could be, you know, that opportunity for both of them. So I hadn't considered it, but I think some smarter minds than mine would consider, you know, finding a way to create a path to that. And you've got the Robert Garcia camp revenge story as a subplot to it as well, which is not the worst thing in the world. Yeah.
That's the selling point right there. Eddie, make the fight.
Make the fight.
Make it.
But Claudia, thanks for joining us on Boxing During Dinner. The next time, hopefully, we'll be doing it in person with some dinner. I'll cook spaghetti for everybody.
That's what we were waiting to hear.
Spaghetti, palomilla, arroz, frijoles. What are you talking about?
Yes.
Some lechon asado.
Hold on, Claudia. I've got to ask her real quick before we go. What's your favorite Cuban restaurant in Miami? If you're mentioning all those things,
what?
Your favorite Cuban restaurant?
From Versailles, and then I have Old Havana, which is literally on the street, and I can smoke cigars, and they have a full bar. So that's my hangout, especially because I get a chance to see the roosters. So I feel like I'm back home. So
I miss Rio Cristal, but we'll go through the other alternatives for as long as we have them.
Sounds good.
Well, Claudia, like much success and everything you do, and congrats on everything you've done. Like, you know, for anybody in boxing, for anybody coming up, starting a career, man or woman, you are an inspiration. Quite honest.
Hi, Armandito. Thank you. I'm gonna get all choked up. Thank you, guys.
we are grateful.
I get a chance to play with you guys. How much better can it get? Except if we're smoking cigars and drinking scotch. Hint, hint, Vic.
I got you. I know. I got you.
But until next week, this has been Boxing During Dinner. We have a lot more to talk about, but catch us next time.